I told you last week that we are skipping some of the big cinematic set pieces of Revelation. Some of those big cinematic set pieces that other people focus on and write books about and say, here is prophecy about what is to come. We are more or less leaving those aside and focusing on the other bits that surround them. You know, the plot of the book. Last week, we ended with John in the throne room of heaven, with John worried about who was going to open this scroll, with John expecting the Lion of Judah to come and do what lions do, and then turning and seeing not a lion, but a lamb who had been slaughtered, who was Christ, who had come to redeem the world, who had taken on the violence of sin and death and everything that makes life less for the sake of creation, and who was therefore worthy of opening this scroll, of bringing the world to its end, of getting this show on the road. And now we are at the end of the scroll being opened, of the seals being broken. And horrible things have happened. Each one of these seals has been a terrible thing for creation and for all of the people in it. Horsemen have been called forth to exact a toll on creation. The sun has turned black and the moon has turned to blood. The souls of the martyrs who are under the throne of God have called out for justice, for vengeance. How long, O God, are we going to have to wait for those people over there to get what's coming to them? And they have been told to wait just a little while longer. And even now, the rich and the powerful, the kings and the potentates are huddled in caves, underground, begging the mountains to fall on them to save them from the wrath of the Lamb. The wrath of the Lamb is such a weird phrase. The wrath of the Lamb who was slaughtered for the sake of creation, as though Christ is going to show up angry to take it out on people. As though Christ, who could have gotten off of the cross but didn't and went to the tomb for our sake, is going to come back and start beating people up for what we have done. As though Christ, who rose from the tomb, who stepped out into the garden for our sake, is going to come back, furious and fuming, spewing fire, and destroying the very thing that he worked so hard and suffered so much to redeem. The wrath of the Lamb is such a strange phrase. After all of these things come to pass, after these seals are broken, there's a pause, there's a moment, just a moment. And John sees a call, hears a call. Let's not break anything else until we have sealed those who are among the righteous, who get to come into God's reign of love. And he hears that there are 144,000 people who get to come forward, who get to be sealed, who are part of God's reign of love. 144,000. An equal share from every one of Israel's tribes. It is a strange thing to imagine that what Christ went through was for that few. But there are millions of people, billions of people, for whom that is what Christianity is, for whom that is who Christ is. There are millions of people, billions of people for whom that is what the good news is, that is what the gospel is. There are millions of people, billions of people, Christian and non-Christian, who will tell you that Christianity is about the wrath of the Lamb. How God is disgusted by you and the sin that you carry. How God is dangling you out above a fiery pit. A gross little worm, a disgusting little bug, a flimsy little spider. And how God could just as well drop you. But if you're lucky, if you are lucky, then you are one of the elect. If you are lucky, you will say the right prayer and do the right things. If you are lucky, God just might put his hand under you before you fall and lift you into the reign of love. If you are lucky. If God chooses you. Earlier this week, or maybe last week, I was in a webinar. It was about church growth. It was one of those things that a company that does church growth stuff puts on for free, so you can come and hear about how you can grow your church, which is usually by buying their product. And one of the things that they kept saying is that they were doing this work because they want heaven to be crowded. See, if we can grow the church, and if we can get everybody in, if we can get enough people in, and they say the right prayer, and they do the right things, and God chooses them, then heaven will be crowded. The streets will be full. There will barely be room to move, but only if we do the stuff, only if we buy the products, only if we set up our Google ads just right. So could we please pay them a ridiculous amount of money? And what struck me about that was this idea in there that there is a risk that heaven will not be crowded. That there is a risk that heaven will be sparsely populated. That heaven will be rural Iowa or North Dakota or Montana. That there will be miles between us and our neighbors if we are lucky enough to get in. And I suspect a little bit that is what John is expecting. The chosen few. Maybe, just maybe, for all of heaven, 144,000 people. But then in this great trick that John keeps playing on us through Revelation, he turns and he sees a multitude. A crowd, more people than anyone could possibly count from every nation and speaking every language. A great multitude. A great crowd, and it turns out that heaven, that God's reign of love is crowded. Is full of people. And ever more full of people. And he asks, or no, he is asked, by someone next to him who should know what is going on, who are these people? And John says, well, you're supposed to know. You're the one who's already here. These are the ones who come through it. Who come through the trials and the tribulations and the troubles. Who worship God and come in to God's reign of love. And there are so many of them, you can't even count them. There are so many of them, they are innumerable. There are so many of them, you can't imagine. And I will tell you that as this book goes on, that innumerable number keeps getting bigger. There keep being more people who somehow get in. There keep being more people who get to show up. There keep being more people who are spared the wrath of the Lamb, whatever that might be. It is almost as if God's reaction to a broken creation is not to destroy it, but to fulfill it. It is almost as if Christ's reaction to a broken creation is not to throw it away, but to repair it. And when we say repair it, we mean repair every last bit, every last part, every last person. It is almost as if John has seen all of these things just to be told, you thought it was going to be that way. You expected it to be a story about revenge, to be a story about proportional justice, to be a story about how just a few folks get let in. But it turns out it's a story about abundance. It's a story about grace. It's a story about steadfast love. It's a story about redemption and repair and restoration and all things coming to their fullness. Without the powers of sin and death and everything that makes life less getting to take anything away. Look, there is a multitude, a crowd bigger than anyone can count. And more people are going to keep showing up. Heaven is going to be crowded. A new heaven and a new earth is going to be crowded. Because it turns out that in God's reign of love, there is room for everyone. And God will not rest. Christ will not rest. The love of the Lamb will not rest until everyone is brought in. That is the good news. That is the gospel. That is what God keeps trying to tell us. That is what Christ keeps trying to do for us. Help us see that there is enough and more than enough for everyone. And that what we expect might seat only a few, what we expect might fit only a few, what we expect might work for only a few, can in fact work for multitudes and crowds that we cannot number, that we cannot count, that we cannot even imagine the size of. And then, when we are all in, when we are all with each other, abiding in God and abiding in love, then we will all be made whole. And I cannot think of better news than that.